Okay, we'll continue from where we left last time. So we had a router that's connected to two computers like this, and we did ping testing and all these things, right? So let's continue. Um, we'll add one more router. So go to this router and select the same type, generic. Okay, and let me label this router 1, right? So now we need to connect them. So click on this connections. We'll use a serial DCE cable. There are two types of serial cable, DCE and other one DTE. Since we are connecting routers which are communicating equipment, we have to use DCE. When we connect two computers that don't forward anything, we'll use a DTE, but routers forward further, right? So we have to use a DCE cable to connect to routers. And again, why a serial DCE cable? If you want to connect routers over a longer distance, we use serial communication. If you want to connect routers for a shorter distance, we could have used a straight through cable. Sorry, not straight through. We have to use a crossover cable. If you want to connect two routers, we have to use crossover cable. Again, coming to that, we have to use, let me see if it is over here. We have to use, when you want to connect a router to router, a crossover cable, a PC to PC again crossover cable, a switch to a switch crossover cable, a PC to router crossover cable. And for these scenarios, a PC to a switch, router to a switch, PC to a hub, will use a straight through cable. And to connect router to router over long distance, so this I can say for short distance to over a long distance, we have to use a serial DCE cable. Okay. So now let's do that. So click on this, click on the router 0, select serial 2/0, the first interface that shows up. And we already clicked on this, right? So drag this to this router, click serial 2/0, right? So now let's configure this router. Go to the command line interface. So let's see. Okay, I don't think these commands work. All right, so let's get into, so let me back out so we can go from the beginning. All right. Alright, so just to show you the commands. So you get into this by typing enable to get into the exec mode or the privileged mode, and then type what? Config T, config space T, to configure a terminal, right? This is a router, right? And you want to configure the terminal. Now this is a global configuration mode. We have already named it to be router 0, so we don't need to do anything globally. So we'll get to that interface, a serial interface. So interface serial 2/0. Now we'll put this router or this serial line on a 10.0.0.0 network, right? So this interface will be actually then 10.0.0.1, and this interface will be actually 10.0.0.2, right? Okay, so let's continue. So we'll set this IP address to 10.0.0.1, and the subnet mask is going to be 255.0.0.0, right? This is a class A private address space. So now you can exit out of this, and you can exit out of this. So if you run show running config, you will see the fast Ethernet 0/0, fast Ethernet 1/0, and now the serial interface, right? So there's nothing more. Now we have to turn it on. I forgot that, right? So we have to turn it on each side. So let's turn it on this side, because you see now this should have been red somewhere. It's not showing up. We did not turn it on, right? So we need to turn on the interface. So you can do everything at a time like we'll do for the other side. So how to get in again? We'll have to say config t interface serial 2/0. So we have to say no shutdown to turn it on. But still the state will remain down, because for a serial cable the other side has to be also turned on. Okay, so let's close this. Let's go to this. We'll do everything at a stretch for this. So this is, we are configuring for the first time, so all these things will appear. Say no, press enter, get into the exec mode by entering enable. Then we have to configure the terminal, so config space t. Now we'll set the host name to router 1. We just labeled it there, so by just putting a label doesn't mean anything, right? This is just for understanding, we put it here. But this is where now by setting the host name to be router 1, we are really configuring it. Okay, so this is in a global configuration mode, so the whole router gets the name of router 1. So now let's get into the interface configuration mode. We'll say interface serial 2/0. So now we want to set its IP address to what, 10.0.2, and then space, the subnet mask is this. So now let's say no shutdown. Okay, so this will really, now we'll say the change state to up, right? So now this cable is running on both sides, right? So you can say exit. Now you can say show running config. You can see this is the serial cable side, right? Now you should also if you look at the IP table, so how we do that, show space IP space route. You see this is the only interface right now, right, for this. So that's like the 10.0.0. network is connected on this serial interface. Whereas if you go for our first router, come out of these modes, so you need to be in the hash this mode without anything, right? So that is the mode for running any commands to see the configuration of the router. Okay, so if you say show IP route here, you'll see 3 entries. So this entry is for this serial interface, this is for this 1.0, and that's for this 2.0, right? So now let's put a server. Go to end devices, click on the third one, generic server, put it over here, and we will put the server on a 172 network. So this is a class B private address space prefix, right? So that's why it says 16 bits for subnet mask. And let's connect them. So this is a router to a computer, so you have to use a crossover cable. So insert on the router, select fast Ethernet 0/0, drag it to the server, fast Ethernet. So let's configure this router now. So how do you do that? Config space terminal, gets into the global configuration mode, then interface, just type F and press the tab, you will get fast Ethernet and 0/0. That's the interface that showed up, right? And we need to set the IP address, right? So what should be the IP address? This is 0.0 prefix, right? So let's label it to avoid any confusion. So this should be 172.16.0.1. That's on this interface, because the router always gets the first available IP address on an address space. So this is a 16.0.0 address space, so the first available IP address will be 0.1. So that's what this router gets, or should be assigned. Now the server could get 16.0.2. Okay, so we are going to assign all these things now. So click on the router. So let's say now what IP address, IP space address 172.16.0.1 and the subnet mask is 16 bits. So 255.255.0.0. Alright, and you can say exit. Now if you say show IP route, now you can see that well, okay, I forgot to always turn it on, so you have to go back where? Go back to config mode, interface fast Ethernet 0/0. Remember, we did not turn it on, so always run the no shutdown command. So no space shutdown command, you have to always run it to turn on. So now it is turned on, so you can see the circle change from red color to green color. So now if you go back and say show IP route, you can see that this interface is enabled, right? So this is the routing table now. So anything that has to go to 172.16 prefix is routed on this interface. Anything that has to go on the 10.0.0 prefix will be routed on the serial line, right? Okay, so these are the two interfaces, so we are configured for that. So now let's go to the server. Let's configure the server. The server gets this IP address, and if you press tab space, its subnet mask comes up automatically. The default gateway for the server is our router, this router, right? So this is the interface, the IP address. Okay, so we'll close this. Now you could actually even test do a ping 172.16.0.1. you'll get the replies, right? Okay, now let's also try to ping from that server to our this guy 192.168.2.2. You cannot for the time being. Why is it? Because when the packet goes to the default gateway, which is this router, right, it looks at the IP address and we just saw the configuration, right? For the routing table is currently this. So it knows how to forward something that has to go to a 10.0 that prefix or to 172.16 that prefix. It doesn't know how to configure something that has to go to a 192.168.2.0. It doesn't know how to send to this prefix. So what we could do is we have to create an entry, right? So we could do that by getting into the configuration mode of this router R1 and get into that interface. Actually this is yeah, so we have to get into the interface. Which interface? We have to get into this the serial interface, because it has to be sent out on this, right? Because you see here, to send to this guy you have to send out on the serial interface, right? So, and you have to send out the next hop to what? This 10.0.0.1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into the serial interface serial 2/0, and I'm going to, now I'm in the interface configuration mode, right? So I'm going to set IP route. So this is how I set the route. It's called a static route. Okay, so manually setting it. Anything that has to go to 192.168.2.0, which is this address space, right, has to go to of course the subnet mask is 255.255.0. Remember in the class we saw the routing table have the destination network address, the subnet mask, and the next hop for that is going to be this 10.0.0.1. 0.0.1. So you can stretch it out to make sure you enter the right one. Alright, so going to this network address, right, 255.255.255.0, that's the subnet mask for this network address, and the next hop has to be 10.0.0.1. okay, press enter. Now you could also, it comes out, right? Let's test it out. Do one more time and say show IP route, but it is configured, right? So anything that has to go on this is sent out on this interface, right? Now you may be wondering, then what about this 192.168.1.0, right? Let's worry it little later. Let's close this and try to ping now from the server to this thing. It will not be still reachable. Okay. Now previously we got this error message telling the destination host unreachable because this gateway did not even know how to forward further. But now you see there's a different set of error message coming out telling request timed out. Why is it so? Because now we configure the gateway to forward to this host, so the host gets those request messages, but when the host wants to send the reply goes to this gateway router 0, but router 0 doesn't know how to send it to this, because the reply messages are targeted to whom? To this guy, right? The server. The replies are sent from this computer to this server. So this router needs to know how to forward that message, that reply address, to this IP address. If you look at this router's IP, the routing table, it knows how to forward to the serial line. So anything that has to be sent out to a 10.0 prefix is sent out on the serial line. Anything to 1.0 is sent out on the other interface. Anything to 2.0 is sent out on this. We haven't configured this router 0 to send it to whom? To anything that has to go to this 172.16.0.0 prefix. So we need to configure that. So how do we do that? Get into the config mode, then get into, so which interface we have to get into? We have to send out on this interface, right? So let's get into interface serial 2/0, and we'll say IP route 172.16.0.0. so it is a class B prefix, right? So the subnet mask has to be 255.0.0. and what's the next hop? The next hop has to be this one, right? Because we want to send from where? From here, from this gateway router to this server. So the next hop has to be 10.0.0.2, right? It comes out automatically. So do one more exit, press enter, and if you type show IP route, we'll see now this. Alright, so anything that has to go to this interface, so to this address space, will be sent out to 10.0.0.2. So now let's run the ping command to this guy and see what happens. See, now you get back the reply. Okay, so now let's run the ping command to 1.2, which is this computer, right? So what do you expect to get? Because this gateway has been configured to forward to whom? Only to 2.0, right? This gateway, you can click on this if you want, doesn't know how to forward to 1.0 yet. So if you try to ping, you will get destination host not reachable. right? So let's close this and let's configure this guy. So let's say config t and interface serial 2/0, and now we have to say IP route to which network address space, to 192.168.1.0, right? So to that address space, and this is a class C prefix, so this is 255.255.255.0, and we want to send from where to where? We want to send from this interface to this interface, right? So the next hop is going to be 10.0.0.1, right? So now say show IP route, it's going to have that information too. All right, so let's now ping to that host. It took a while for the request to time out. The first one did not get the request back. The reason for that is because this guy would take some time to figure out the default entry and forward to this router, right? So the reply didn't come back on time. So, but the subsequent request, because as I said, ping involves 4 request messages. So if you run now again, you will get back the replies for all the 4 requests. For the first request, it may take a while and it may time out, because this router has the information to forward to this router, and this router can forward to this address. And by default, it has to send the reply for 172.16.0.2 to this router, right? That's the default gate, next hop. So this router has to forward it to this router, and then this will forward to this. Okay, because this router has been configured to forward anything to this address space will send to go to this interface, and anything from here will go to here. Okay. Now you could see the routing table at the gateway at the computer 2. So click on this and let's see. Let's go to IP. No, not IP. Let's go to command prompt. I think the command is still show IP route for computers. No. IP there should be some way you can look at the routing table, but remember when we configured it, right? This is the default gateway for us, so that's the static IP. So anything that has to come out of the computer has to be sent to this gateway, right? You can see it here, right? Okay. So similarly, anything that has to come out of this computer has to go to 2.1. That's what shows up here, right? Now we could run even a trace route. So let's run a trace route. So let's do trace route. This is how you enter the command trace RT to this router. So you want to see what's the sequence of IP addresses of the routers or the networks we have to go through. So you see here, if you want to trace the route from this computer to this server, you have to reach this 2.1 interface, right? And then from the 2.1 interface you have to reach the 10.0.02 interface, and then you have to reach the actual server. Okay, so it gives you the entire sequence of routes, and you see here the time increases monotonically. It takes 3 milliseconds to send. Actually, the trace route works like this: you send a request and that guy has to send back a reply, the first hop. So it takes 3 milliseconds for that, Then for second hop to send back a reply, it takes 9 milliseconds, and for the last hop to send back a reply, it takes 12 milliseconds. Okay. It may not be deterministic too, alright, because the reply is coming individually from that hop, right? So this guy has to reply, and then it sends a packet with TTL2 that makes this guy to reply, and then a packet with TTL3 that makes this guy to reply. The server has to reply, right? Okay, we will stop here.